All right, good morning. I want to welcome everybody to this wonderful event, the WCU's College of Art and Humanities Alumni Speaker Series. We're fortunate, I think, blessed as well, to have Jen Rossi Long, the director of the Twardowski Career Center at WCU, as our alumni speaker today. And I should also say that she is a proud philosophy graduate of Westchester University Philosophy Department. So can we put a round of applause for this wonderful event? Personally, I'm excited about this interview to just get to know her a little bit, and also to talk about philosophy, sort of the connection between philosophy and the real world. Because especially as a faculty member in the line of philosophy, I always want students to see an example of what it's like, to study philosophy and then have a career after studying philosophy. So, Jen, if you're ready, we'll start the interview. So, so if you can talk to us about how you ended up at WCU. How did you choose WCU when you chose this university?
Yeah, so I kind of think WCU chose me, and this is why. It was not my first choice when I was looking at schools. I think I envisioned myself like more in a city, but I was encouraged to apply to Westchester as well, and so I did, along with some other schools. And there were a few things that sort of happened that I think were supposed to happen. So one was that I did have a very good friend from high school that was a year ahead of me that came to Westchester, and I had the opportunity to spend a couple days here and really get a feel for the campus, and I had a really positive feeling after that. But really in the end, it came down to a financial decision. My family was like, this is what we can afford, so this is what we're gonna do. And I was a little bummed, I'm not gonna lie, because it wasn't what I pictured for myself. But I share that because I wouldn't trade my experience at Westchester for anything in the world. So I feel like this is really the path that was supposed to unfold before me and was supposed to happen. And so I share that because I think sometimes we put a lot of pressure on ourselves to make those decisions, right? Like choosing the perfect college, choosing the perfect major, the perfect career. But really sometimes I think it's about just where you're meant to be and what you do to kind of get out of that, what you put in to get out of that experience. So yeah, I feel really fortunate that I ended up at Westchester.
Oh, that's wonderful. Thank you. Of course, you're a philosophy alum, and if you can kind of talk to us about why and when and how did you choose that major? Like, when did you declare for philosophy? Did you come into study philosophy?
No, I did not. I didn't know what it was. My first year at Westchester, you're handed a schedule. Intro to philosophy was on there. I was like, okay, all right, we'll see how this goes. I had a wonderful professor, Dr. Claghorn, for that intro to philosophy class, who was just one of those people that you just feel the passion pouring out of them for what they're doing and what they're talking about, and for teaching and for being in the classroom. And so I think I picked up on that almost immediately, but simultaneously I came in as a management major, and I was taking a microeconomics course, and I wasn't doing well in it. I really liked the professor, but I could not draw a supply and demand curve to save my life, right? Because we're not all good at everything. That was something I was not good at for whatever reason. It was not clicking for me. And so I think me seeing how I was performing there and then seeing how I was performing in the intro to philosophy class and realizing okay, if I have an hour of free time and I need to do homework for one or the other or study for one or the other, I just kept gravitating towards philosophy. So it was kind of a good sign that, all right, this is something I should do. So by second semester in my first year, I did change my major. And I will say I still remember walking into Dr. Claghorn's office and telling him, hey, I think I want to change to philosophy. And I will never forget this moment. His face lit up and he said, this is so exciting. And I felt that he meant it, right? And that was really meaningful. I don't think I'll ever forget that moment. But yeah, so then I was in philosophy and I never looked back. I will say, the professor who was my microeconomics professor, I had the opportunity to reconnect with a couple years later. He gently reminded me that choosing philosophy instead of economics was more like running towards the problem, because so much of economics is philosophy. So I got a laugh out of that, because I was like, all right, that's a valid point.
That's so interesting, part of your story, because when I went to college as well, I actually went to study economics.
Okay.
So I thought that was interesting that you talked about microeconomics, and you also mentioned Professor Cladwell as one of your favorite professors. Are there other favorite professors during your undergraduate career here? And also, were you part of organizations, and if you had internship experiences, memories, also extracurricular activities when you're working while you were sitting here?
Yeah, absolutely. So yes, Dr. Cladwell was definitely a favorite professor. And I will say he started every class having us cheer, the definition of justice. It was TTPD GEHOIS, which was tell the truth, pay your debts, give to each his own, and interest of the stronger. I don't remember anything else verbatim, right, from my college experience, but we had a little bit of fun doing that at the beginning of every class, and I guess it was effective, right? There was another professor who was still on campus, Dr. Jeffrey Harris. He was in the health sciences. I took a stress management course because I had some extra, room in my schedule to take an elective, and it just sounded interesting. It was so different from anything else I was taking. Not only did I enjoy the content, but he was just a very empathetic and caring person. Like, you could tell he really cared about like the students that were in his class, and again, was really excited about the material that he was teaching, and that just resonated with me. And then in terms of being involved, probably the biggest thing I did was I was a university ambassador, so I gave tours on campus to prospective students and families, and I just love that. I don't know why I decided to do it at first. I saw a flyer or something, and I'm like, this looks kind of interesting. Like, I want to check this out. So I ended up doing that for my 4 years that I was on campus, and it's actually how I discovered sort of like my interest in working on a college campus and working with folks at this stage in their life. So it ended up, what I thought was just going to be sort of like a hobby and something to do, ended up being a really meaningful experience.
So I've been dying to ask this question, so my students can actually hear it. How long ago did you graduate from here again?
Ouch. That was 2005, so almost 20 years.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay, that's a segue to my next question. What was your favorite memory 20 years ago? Your favorite memory, absolute favorite memory of being a student here at WCU?
Yeah, this one's nearly impossible. Right? I feel like there's so many good memories, and I feel really privileged to have so many good memories. But one that sticks out is just I lived in Tyson Hall up on the 5th floor, so shout out to Tyson. And I just so happened, that was one of the residence halls that has like 3 hallways, and then there's a big meeting space in the middle. At least there was 20 years ago. I haven't been there in a long time. And so folks would kind of like hang out in that middle space. And I remember meeting all of who ended up being my closest college friends, and now that I'm going on 20 years of friendship with, on that 5th floor of Tyson in that meeting hall. Like, I remember the first time, I don't know, it was one evening, I was a little bored, my roommate was out, I didn't feel like watching anything on TV, and of course there was no social media, which makes me sound like I'm 1,000 years old, but there was not, and so there wasn't anything to do, and I was like, I'll wander out into like the common space and just see what's going on. And that's where I met who ended up being 3 of my very like best friends at college. So just kind of like thinking about that first meeting and thinking about like, I probably would have met them at some point along the way, but I'm so glad that I wandered out of my group that night. I would encourage other folks to, if you have the opportunity to kind of show up at something, or Rams After Hours, something happening in Sykes, just show up, right? Because there could be opportunity for you.
Oh, that's wonderful. Thank you so much. So let's transition to your professional experience. What is your current official title, and what are your responsibilities in your current position?
Yeah, so I'm director of the Twardowski Career Development Center here on campus. And so that just means I lead sort of like the vision and all of our strategic priorities for the center. So with that, I oversee two teams. So we have our career education and counseling team, and those are the folks that are really working one-on-one with students in terms of, well, everything from I have no idea what I want to major in, or I don't know why I'm in college, all the way through I know what I want to do, I just need some help with my resume. Those are also the folks that come into the classroom, they partner with faculty, they create career related assignments that faculty utilize. And then on the other team, that's the employer engagement and events team. So those are the folks that are really more externally facing. They're really encouraging employers to come to campus to hire students for jobs and internships. They plan all of our events, our career fairs, our industry meetups. So those are really the two main like functioning teams in the office that I provide leadership for.
Okay, thank you. If you could share some sort of highlights of your career, either when you worked in the past or currently, you can share what you love, depending on current and past, what you've learned, also what you would consider to be your greatest accomplishments professionally.
Yeah, well, I love it all, and I'm sort of a weird millennial because I've been in the career development field since I graduated. I've changed jobs, right, but I've stayed within that field, which is sort of off trend, you know, if you look at the national data. But so I'm the type of person, I like to create, I like to build, I like to partner and collaborate with folks. I like the opportunity to start when nothing is there and be able to see something grow, right? Like these are just things I tend to like be attracted to in my work. And while I was at my last institution, I was in one of those external employer-facing roles in the Career Center. And we were starting to recruit more from like the New York area, even though we were Philly-based. And we realized we don't really have a pathway for students that want to then return to that like New York City, like metro area to either work or intern or attend grad school. We just didn't have those pathways built. So I had an incredible opportunity to be able to work with folks across campus in all different like divisions and departments, and to work with some external employers to really build that pathway. And I was at that last institution at St. Joseph's University for about 10 years. The New York work was happening maybe my last like 6 years, I would say. And in that time, we created the investment banking boot camp, which took place up in the city. We had our advertising agency crawls where we went to different ad agencies and students got to learn about them. We also had New York interview days where over breaks we were taking students up to New York to actually interview for opportunities up in the city so that the employers didn't have to come down to Philly. So it was just really rewarding to see like students starting to get internships and jobs where that just hadn't existed before. So that was something I was proud of. I think another thing, I identify as like a servant leader. So I believe that my role as a leader is really to like serve the folks that are on my team and not the other way around. So if I had to say another accomplishment that I'm proud of, it would definitely be that I've had the opportunity to promote 5 people within my office over the 5 years that I've been here on campus, which we don't always have the opportunity to do in higher education, just the way some of the offices are structured. But when there were opportunities, I'm proud of the fact that I could make that happen.
That's wonderful. Thanks for sharing some of your greatest accomplishments with us. But I also think it's good to discuss struggles as well, because I think part of being human is also struggling for existence or in existence as well in our career paths. And I think it could be reassuring for our students just to hear that our successful grads underwent certain struggles that they went. So if you could tell us about like job hunts and getting stuck in careers, like self-doubt and so on, what are some of the struggles you could say you face professionally?
Yeah. So I'll talk about one that happened a very long time ago, and now I have the perspective to say, oh, it's all good. And then I'll talk about one that's a little more recent and still like a little raw. So I ended up in career development again by accident, but I suppose that's where I was supposed to be. I mentioned to you all that I gave tours on campus, and so I thought admissions was where I wanted to be on a college campus. I had become comfortable in that space, speaking to students and their families, working open house days, going to some college recruitment fairs, and I really felt like that's where I was going to launch my career. So I'm applying to jobs. I'm not even getting interviews, folks. Like it wasn't even like I got to the point of the interview. It was just a whole lot of rejections because they weren't looking at the experience that I had kind of volunteering and being a student leader as, the experience that they were looking for. That was super frustrating. It was definitely difficult to go through, but I will say that it forced me to open my thinking and not be so sort of myopic and like, this is the one path. So I really had to take a look at like, okay, well, what do I think would be cool about working on a college campus? And what did I like about the stuff that I did with admissions? And then how could I potentially utilize some of that elsewhere? And that's where a position opened actually right here on campus in the Career Center, the staff assistant role, which was my first job out of college. So it was kind of cool to be able to do that. I left to get my master's degree, went to another university, then went to St. Joe's, and then had the opportunity to come back. So what felt like the worst thing possible at the time ended up being a really good thing for me. The other thing that I'll share is I have been back and forth and all over the place about whether or not to get my doctorate, whether to get my terminal degree. And I finally, about a year and a half ago, came to the conclusion, like, yes, I want to do this, right? I'm doing it. I have the master's. I want to go for this. I happened to find a program that was aligned with my interests that I immediately fell in love with. It was at a competitive institution, so I knew that there was a chance that I wouldn't get in, and I did. So after going through the writing all of the essays and your problem of practice and all of the things that you need to submit, unfortunately that wasn't meant to work out for me. I've looked into some other schools, but I think I'm still just really trying to figure out, is that really the path that I want to take? But I will say, again, because I guess maybe this is like a theme for me now, that kind of forced me to say, okay, well, if not the EDD, right, this doctorate that you were focused on, like some of these things that need to come out, like ideas and other things that you want to do, like what are some other ways you might be able to do them? So I've had the ability to publish a chapter in a book about career development, so I got to do some of the writing. I get to do consulting with some other campuses. So if they're having some issues or there's something that they're trying to change in the way that they're offering their services, I've had the incredible opportunity to be able to do that because as a philosophy major, getting paid to use your brain is like the best thing ever, right? Like I just can't imagine something better. That is like a philosophy major's dream, right? So I do love the consulting, but I guess I say that because again, I'm still disappointed about the outcome from applying for my EDD. I'm still very up in the air about how I want to move forward with that. But I was able to find like some other outlets for some of the things that I want to do. And I just think that's important because I would encourage you, like if you're coming up against something in the job search with your education or even somewhere else in life, to kind of look at it as an opportunity to step back and say, okay, how can I still get what I'm really looking for here? And maybe it doesn't look the way I thought it would. So.
Wow, I really like the tagline. Philosopher of philosophy is getting paid to use your brain.
Yeah, you're thinking critically and you're getting paid for it. That's what consulting is.
I love it.
Yeah.
That's my new tagline.
There you go.
You did say something about a master's. I was just kind of curious, we can just the question. What was the master's in?
Oh yeah, so I got my master's in counseling and higher education.
Okay.
So it was very much like a kind of like student affairs, higher education focus.
Yeah, that's good. So let's segue back to WCU education philosophy. Are there any parts of that education philosophy that you revert back to professionally since you graduated? Professionally, personally, is there part of that education philosophy that you fall back on?
Every day. Yeah, every day. Because in my role, and I think in any leadership role, things are complicated, and you're working with people, and that's also complicated, right? So the critical thinking and the logic classes that I took as a philosophy major were absolutely like one of the best parts of my undergraduate experience, and the ones that I come back to like very directly quite often. I think as a result of those classes and like some of that training and the assignments that I've had to do, I'm a little more thoughtful than immediately reactive. So I'm the person in the meeting that's not the first to respond to something someone says, but I'm thinking about it, and I feel like when I come back with something, it's what I intended to say, right? It's intentional, and it's not just like a reaction to something. So I feel like that has been really helpful for sure. I also come back to, philosophy was pretty writing intensive. So I write a lot of reports, a lot of what I call like persuasion pieces if there's something we need to advocate for in the office. But sometimes it's shorter pieces that I'm writing, whether it's just like a post on LinkedIn and I'm trying to convey a certain message about the office or something, right? I do a lot of writing, and I feel like being able to write in that way through philosophy, when things were not tangible and sometimes vague. I think, again, it comes back to the critical thinking piece, but I think being able to write in that space is really helpful too, because it helps you take this sort of big nebulous thing and make some sort of sense out of it. So I think I'm a more clear communicator by writing because of that.
I love it.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So as a director of the Career Center here at WCU, do you have any advice for our current students hoping to make most of their college education and succeed professionally? And I ask you this because sometimes when I engage with my students in the class, it seems like the ultimate priority is, I just want to graduate and get a job. And so I think it would be helpful just for them to hear from their experience what's, will put them in a position to be able to get the dream job that they've always wanted.
Yeah, I have a lot of advice on that, working in a career center. But okay, so first and foremost, I would say like try, and this is really hard, so I'm just asking you to try not to put too much unnecessary pressure on yourself. And I say unnecessary because paths are not linear, and success looks different for a lot of people. There's this great image that I have in my office. It's like a picture of a line going like this, and it says what people think success looks like. And then next to it, it's this crazy, scribble, and it says what success actually looks like, right? It's not what you think it is. It's not I have to do this to get to this to get to this. The way that you look for a job could look differently than the way that somebody else looks for a job, or the way that you find, what your passion is and what you want to pursue. Your exploration process might look different from somebody else's. So I would just say that the pressure is unhelpful in that, right? You're putting it on yourself, and you might not even need to. And when you start to feel that sort of well up, come talk to somebody. Like, we would love to talk to you about that in the Career Center. If you have a mentor, I'm sure they would love to talk about that, an advisor, a professor, right? When you feel that start to well up, it has to come out so that you can just kind of let it go and just have more clarity in the next steps that you want to take. My other piece of advice is I will use an analogy. So if you've ever been on an airplane or you've seen an airplane take off, right? It's got a super long runway because it has to build up the speed and the momentum to be able to get that very large, very heavy metal object up into the air, right? Like, just, it's physics, right? They need to hit a certain speed. Similarly, when you start earlier on in your college career, really exploring who you are, what you like, what you're good at, what's important to you, right? That values piece. When you start doing that earlier on, you're giving yourself that longest possible runway to build that momentum, and then at the point of graduation to take off, right? Whereas if you say, okay, in my final semester, my final year here, I'm going to start trying to figure out who I am. Okay, it's not like it's not going to happen for you, but you've given yourself a really short runway. So my biggest piece of advice is just give yourself that runway.
Thank you very much. I wonder if you have any advice for potential students who are planning to attend WCU, who could be listening to this right now.
Do it. come to Westchester. I think that's my biggest piece of advice is just, I'm biased, I get that, but I think that wherever you end up, and hopefully Westchester, just to try to make the most of it. So join something, play a sport, do theater, join the radio station, go to a Rams After Hours event, like do something, because I think that what you put into it is what you can expect to get out of the experience. And then everything else, kind of falls into place for you. You find your place once you do that. And I feel like being at Westchester, a campus of this size, I think there's like 300 clubs and organizations. I mean, there's so much variety in terms of what you can do. So I think that's the biggest thing, to really make an effort to be engaged and be involved.
Yeah. Thank you. I'd like to hear your thoughts on this. So I remember when I graduated from college, like I had a moment of like adjustment, like because college was fun, my friends, the parties, like it was so fun. And then everyone went away. I was alone. I was like, well, what am I gonna do with myself? And then I was trying to get a job, and all of that. So the question is, what advice do you have for students on how to transition well from college life to the real world?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. So yeah, I think it's one of those that no two people are going to do that the same or need the same things out of it. But overall, I think that similar to I guess my advice for being on campus and being at Westchester, if you find yourself at a job, some organizations have like different employee groups that you can join, or they have volunteer service activities that you can engage in, or there's other ways to volunteer on like different projects. So again, I recommend doing things that kind of step out of like maybe what you're currently doing, where you have the opportunity to meet other folks, or some places will host like happy hours or whatever. You got to kind of figure out like what your scene is there. But I think it's just a good opportunity to like get to know other people. I also think that having a mentor is really critical at that time in your life. So someone who's not your supervisor, you're not reporting to them, they don't even have to work where you work or be in your industry, but just somebody that you can bounce ideas off of, or when you feel that kind of like, I'm a little alone in this, and like, oh yeah, I like to go out and have fun with my friends, but I don't know if I want to talk to them about this thing that's going on. It's just somebody that you can trust and bounce ideas off of. I think that's so valuable. We have such a large alumni network at Westchester, and there's so many people who have graduated before all of us that genuinely want to be helpful and want to lend their time. So we in the Career Center, we can help you make that connection, but I feel like having that sort of that mentor can really help you get through that.
Yeah, thanks. So let me ask a couple of questions on the fun stuff.
Yeah.
What do you enjoy doing in your free time? And do you have any cool hobbies, side projects that you'd like to share with us?
Yeah, so you should just know, if I have a free hour of time, there's like a really good chance that I'm watching Ted Lasso, just period. Right? That is like a good thing to bet on. I just think it's pure perfection. I love it. I wrote a piece on leadership lessons learned from Ted Lasso. So I was like, oh, I love this. I'm into this. So anyway, I'm either watching Ted Lasso. I do play the piano, which is an interesting one for me because I did it when I was younger. I stopped for, I guess, about 25 years, and I just recently picked it back up, and I've really, really been enjoying that. So it was nice to like come back around to that, and it was a little rocky at first, but once I got into it, I was like, oh, it's incredible, like what muscle memory like will do for you with an instrument. So that was cool. I do enjoy traveling as well, and I'm happy to have the opportunity to do that a little bit more now. So I take a lot of walks. I listen to podcasts or my music. I live right in the borough here, so I'm always somewhere around town.
What's your favorite podcast?
I like Simon Sinek a lot. A bit of optimism. Yeah, I just think he has some really interesting guests that come on, and he's just so insightful. And I love the questions that he asks and the way that he engages his guests.
You're such a philosopher.
I can't hide it. I am who I am. I can't hide it.
Yeah, so I wonder if there's anything else about yourself that you feel is fun and important, that you'd like to share. And I'd like to open it up to our students and see if there's any student that kind of question for you, so that's okay.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah, what else is important? I will say one of the things, because every job is going to have its stressful times or whatever. So I guess another piece of advice is really finding something that you enjoy doing. So I referenced the piano. That's definitely good for like stress relief. I also have like an interesting, I guess, like hobby that most people don't know about, but bear in mind, I was not just a philosophy major, I was also a creative writing minor. So I enjoy rewriting the words of songs, either to be about my friends or something that's going on. It just, I don't know why. I like being able to play with words like that, and having it like fit in terms of like the musicality of it. So if y'all are sitting there thinking that there is not a version of Queen's Bohemian Rhapsody that exists in this world that is entirely about the Career Center, you are incorrect. I'm sorry to tell you. Because it exists. I just haven't found someone to perform it yet. But it totally exists. And I absolutely loved writing it. So,
that's wonderful.
yes.
I think it's so cool.
Totally random, but
Yeah, thanks for sharing that.
Yeah. Of
All right.
course.
I'd like to open it up for questions, and if there's any question you'd like to ask, just kind of special hands and then take the questions. Okay. Oh, we have one question. Jesse.
Hi. You mentioned earlier of how like you weren't sure about what to do with your EDD, right? And like now you're doing what you're doing now. Do you feel like now in your career that eventually like you'll figure it out like how to go back to that, or are you happy with what you're doing now? Like will you ever circle back to that, or do you feel like your position where you are now is like for a reason, like you're destined like for what you do now?
Yeah. That's a really good question. I think I will come back around to it at some point. But I do like what I'm doing right now. So in terms of its necessity, like right in this moment, I don't feel that like I have to because I'm trying to be this or trying to get to this or what, right? Like I don't have that like urgency. And I think I had seen something, I read a blog by somebody that I follow. She leads what's called the University Innovation Alliance. So it's like a national group that really looks at like innovation within higher education. And she wrote about how, now she was talking about it at the college president level, how higher education didn't just need leaders who were good at leading their institutions, they needed leaders that were willing to lead for all of higher education. So not just saying, well, we're doing this good thing and we're going to keep it under wraps because we just want to have it as a competitive advantage, but being willing to like share those ideas and say, hey, I have something, I had this challenge, here's how I overcame it. It might help your institution too. And that really, really resonated with me because I felt like I have this opportunity not just to, lead within the Career Development Center or be one of the many leaders on campus, but also to lead within the field of career development. I think that's where some of the consulting comes in. So I think, I'm excited about that and having the ability to maybe position that a little bit more while I still figure out what's happening with the EDD. Because I know myself, and at some point, director of the Career Center isn't going to be enough anymore. I know that. So I'm going to have to figure that out. I don't have that figured out now because it is still very much enough. I do love the job, but yeah. So it's sort of like looming out there, but I do feel like where I am now is a good place.
So does that like go back into what you were saying, like having that unnecessary pressure on yourself?
Oh yeah. Oh yes, because there was definitely a period of time, a couple years ago, I would say, where it felt like everyone around me was suddenly in doctoral programs. And I was like, oh shoot, I should probably, but I don't know that I want to, right? So I definitely felt some of that pressure, but at the end of the day, I felt like it is so much work, and a PhD and EDD, right? Like it is so much work, it is so much energy, it's so much time. It's balancing so much time away from your family, right? Because there's things that have to get done. So it didn't seem, I guess, logical to me in the end to base my decision on like what everybody else was doing and kind of like shoulding myself, right? Like you should do this, you should do that. Yeah. Thanks. Does that answer your question? Okay. Thank you.
That's great. Who else? Does anybody else have questions for Jen?
That's cool.
Yes, go for it.
You talked a little bit about like your leadership style and how you really try to kind of like advocate for your employees and your constituents rather than having them sort of like bolster your role. Is that something you've always kind of had, or was there something that sort of inspired that like approach for you along the way? Or yeah, can you speak a little about that?
Yeah, that is a really good question. I think I think I always had a little bit of that in me, and I don't know where that came from. I might have seen that like in my parents, or but I'm not cognizant of it, I suppose. But I'm thinking back to like what I would consider my earliest like leadership role, and that was captain of my high school volleyball team, right? So even thinking about that, I feel like I was really dedicated to like the team's cause, or like lifting up somebody else if they needed it, or if someone did a good job. Making sure that I said it, right? They got that like recognition, because I feel like some of it might be a little bit of a reinforcement, right? Because I feel like I learned from that early on that somebody else accomplishing something also felt good to me. Like it wasn't like a zero-sum game where it's like, oh, well, they just made that awesome play and I didn't, right? And being annoyed about it, it was like, they just made that awesome play and we just won the game. And I liked that feeling, I guess, of being able to like recognize and like share in somebody else's joy. I also think I'm inherently a pretty empathetic person, and so that comes into play a lot in terms of that like servant leadership piece. Yeah,
that's awesome. It's really nice to see that, because I feel like a lot of times that isn't like a leader's natural tendency in a lot of situations. So it's nice that you kind of have that built in.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Yeah. Well, and I've had some leaders, above me at different times. I'm very fortunate here at Westchester to have some really great leaders like directly above me and higher. Very early on in my career, I worked for somebody who was a micromanager, and that was rough. So I feel like at the same time that I was bringing in things that I think were just maybe part of who I was, or that I kind of learned were like more joyful for me as a leader, I also saw examples of things that I didn't want to replicate. And I was like, all right, like noted, I don't want someone to feel like this. Because when you work for someone who's micromanaging, especially earlier on in my career, it felt like, well, am I even any good at this? Or like, am I putting off a vibe that they can't trust me, like to do the work, right? So I knew how that felt and didn't want to make anyone else feel that way.
Thank you.
Yeah, sure.
That's awesome. I'll take one final question, if there's anybody who's interested before we wrap this up. Let's see. All right, it looks like everyone's satisfied with the interview. So we've come to the end of this wonderful session together. Please can we give a round of applause to our speaker today. Thank you all for being here. All right. Okay.
Yes,
Yeah.
thank you so
Thank you.
much for the opportunity.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, so it's fun.
Yeah, and y'all, I'm on campus. I'm literally over in Lawrence, so I was sharing earlier. I'm that person like in class that would always like leave class and I'd be like, why didn't I ask that, or why didn't I make this point? If you find yourself in that position and you do have questions or you didn't want to ask in a group, like you are more than welcome to just like shoot me an email or stop by, reach out to me. I'm happy to chat anytime. So. Yeah.
All right, thanks. So I'll see you guys on Thursday. Thanks for being here. Appreciate it.